Good morning. I'm Pauline Verzosa, sitting in for Gretchen Ho. It is Friday, the 22nd of August, and we're bringing you Morning Matters because your mornings matter. Class suspensions are in effect in some areas across the country due to the combined effects of a low-pressure area and southwest monsoon or habagat. And now, with the bad weather, the defective flood control projects will be in the spotlight once again. We will talk more about that later on in the program. Former DPWH Chief Rogelio Singson rejected an offer to return to the post, citing family as his priority. Singson will instead help organize a private sector group to audit suspicious flood control projects flagged by President Bongbong Marcos. And Rodrigo Duterte's legal team has once again requested his interim release from ICC custody. His lawyer, Nicholas Kaufman, stated that an unnamed country is prepared to accept the former president under any conditions set by the court. And welcome to our program, Morning Matters, where we talk about the issues you need to know for the rest of your day. And now first on the agenda, amid the controversy on flood control projects, former Public Works Secretary Rogelio Singson has turned down the idea of returning to the department despite receiving feelers from Malacanang from the Post. Here's the report.
Former Public Works Secretary Rogelio Singson told the big story that his priority for now is his family. That's why he's not inclined to take back the helm of the Public Works Department. Instead, Singson revealed he is helping organize a public sector audit group under the Management Association of the Philippines to track suspicious flood control projects flagged by President Marcos.
Definitely, there were feelers, but my answer is no, because my priority is my family and their safety.
Singson suggests a moratorium on flood control projects while the review is ongoing. He said this will ensure public funds are not wasted on so-called ghost or half-ghost projects.
Tignan lang kung nasaan yan, mga projects na yan na dinagdag, na insert, so that we know exactly what types of projects these are and whether they make sense. Remember what I have always mentioned in the past. Right project ba yan? No? Yung 5 hours of good governance. Is it the right project? Is it the right cost? Is it the right quality?
The former DPWH chief insists he did not allow insertions during his term, stressing that corruption began only after he left office. According to Singson, lawmakers now were able to push through questionable projects because congressional leaders allowed budget insertions to pass.
Hindi naman pwedeng mangyari yung insertions na yan kung hindi pumayag ang leadership of both houses and the Senate.
So how can they conduct an honest-to-goodness investigation that you're saying, looking back, when the leadership is the one that, fingers are pointing to them?
Kaya nga ang appeal ko, and which is the same appeal of the President, time out muna, mahiya naman tayo. Time out muna.
Despite the controversy, Singson said current DPWH Chief Manuel Bonoan still enjoys the trust of President Marcos, which he stresses is critical for whoever leads the department moving forward.
Meantime, a nearly 193 million peso dike in Barangay Apitong, Nauhan, Oriental Mindoro remains non-existent despite being listed as completed in 2024. Here's the report.
News 5 tracked down one of the alleged ghost flood control projects mentioned by Senator Ping Lacson in his privilege speech on Wednesday. The project is a dike in Barangay Apitong, right beside the Pangalaan River in Nauhan. However, the barangay captain insists the project does not exist.
Yan po, kahit isa pong project na mega dike, wala po kayong makikita. Ay ako po, 50 years na dito na nakatira.
Records on the Sumbong sa Pangulo website indicate that the contract was worth nearly 193 million pesos and was listed as completed in 2024. Residents had requested the dike because the river can rise up to 10 feet during the rainy season. Just last month, roads were nearly washed away and rice fields submerged when the habagat struck.
Pagka nabaha po sir, laging naabot yung bukid ko. Malaki na po nakukuha.
Sapagkat meron po pong proyekto ang barangay namin, subalit hindi na isagawa. Na kailangan, kaya sobrang nakakalungkot po at nakakagalit dahil pati barangay namin ay nagamit sa ganitong mga pangyayari.
Meanwhile, Governor Humerlito Bonsdolor revealed that the funds allocated in the General Appropriations Act for the province's flood control projects are more than double the amount approved in the National Expenditure Program.
Idinidivide nila sa iba't ibang section and portion. Yung in-between, butas, doon pumapasok ang tubig, yung dulo nito binabangga, kaya nawawasak. Kasi in-between lagi may ini-insert, ito, billions of pesos. And yet, walang maparusahan. Walang umaamin na nagkasala.
First District Representative Arnan Panalingan denied any role in the process and said he had previously called out the DPWH over discrepancies in the projects.
Wala tayong kapasidad yan ang Kongreso. Yan ay exclusive authority, exclusive na teritoryo ng DPWH ang paggawa ng design, paggawa ng plano, pag-bid, pag-award ng kontrata at pagbabayad ng kontraktor.
Well, some members of the House of Representatives are pushing back against Vice President Sara Duterte's recent remarks on flood control projects. Duterte said that not only contractors but also lawmakers should be investigated for alleged irregularities. She added that the contractors act as subordinates of members of Congress.
Well, lahat sila dapat. No, hindi lang yung mga contractors dahil yung mga contractors ay mga tauhan din sila ng mga members of the House of Representatives. Binanggit ko doon na 2 tao lang ang nagde-decide sa budget ng Pilipinas. Yun ay si Martin Romualdez at si Zaldico. At yung mga kasamahan nila o mga grupo nila.
In response, Manila's 2nd District Representative Rolando Valeriano accused the Vice President of spreading falsehoods to cover up her failures and poor performance in public service.
Masyadong mababa naman yung tingin ng Vice President sa Kongreso. So siguro po yung kinakalat ni Vice President na yan, mukhang lies na naman po, mukhang kasinungalingan. Para siguro pagtakpan niya yung ibang mga kapalpakan niya. Siguro dapat niya sagutin saan napunta yung confidential fund, di ba kung bakit masama ang performance o malami ang performance ng DepEd during her time.
Meanwhile, Navota's Representative Toby Tiangco is urging the DPWH to study restoring the city's flood control system and building a second floodgate. Tiangco said the existing 20-year-old floodgate has suffered repeated breakdowns and could fail again without a backup. He also criticized the MMDA for their supposed lapses in monitoring and maintenance that led to the malfunction. And now let's check the latest on the weather. Several areas may experience rains today and over the weekend. This is partly due to the low-pressure area spotted some 150 kilometers east of Baler, Aurora. The LPA is set to traverse northern Luzon and is expected to become a tropical depression within 24 hours. This brings scattered rains over Metro Manila and over the regions of Ilocos, Cordillera, Cagayan, and Central Luzon, as well as in the provinces of Laguna, Quezon, Rizal, Camarines Norte, and Camarines Sur. Habagat, meanwhile, will trigger rains over the rest of Luzon, as well as Western Visayas, Negros Island, Zamboanga Peninsula, Barm, Soc-Sargen, Lanao del Norte, and Misamis Occidental. Due to the inclement weather, several local governments have already suspended classes. These include Muntinlupa City, Castilla in Sorsogon, and Albay Province. Now, don't go away. We're just going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're still watching Morning Matters here on One News. Batangas 1st District Representative Leandro Leviste has proposed realigning 250 billion pesos worth of flood control allocations to education. During a House Committee on Appropriations hearing, he recommended channeling the funds to classroom construction and tax relief. The Department of Budget and Management said it supports the proposal, provided the Education Department can fully utilize the additional budget. Leviste, a longtime education advocate, has also filed House Bill number 27, which would grant students from kindergarten to college a 1,000 peso monthly allowance to help cover school expenses. And now to talk more about this proposal, joining us this morning is Batangas 1st District Representative Leandro Leviste. Good morning, Congressman, and thanks for joining us here on Morning Matters.
Morning, Pauline. Thank you for having me.
All right, well, right off the bat, Congressman, tell us, how should this flood control budget be realigned? You pointed out that 250 billion pesos has been set aside already for flood control, while only 13 billion is for classrooms. How much exactly of that flood control budget should be shifted to education?
I think almost all of it can be, because using my own district's example, many of the proposed flood control projects don't have feasibility studies and are expansions on earlier phases that were already damaged by recent storms. I propose that one of the ways that we fund further flood control projects is by asking the contractors of the previous projects that have been damaged to cover the costs of repairing and extending their flood control projects. If we do that, then we can have both flood control projects and classrooms.
So you're saying, Congressman, all 250 billion be shifted for education, for classrooms, leaving flood control with zero allocation for next year?
During the congressional hearing on Monday, I proposed 80% or 200 of the 250 be shifted to education and, if possible, by the DOF, lower taxes. But I think it's going to be a longer discussion in Congress where exactly it goes. But I think the important thing is that it is not wisely spent on flood control, given the perceived systemic corruption in DPWH. This has also been echoed by others who have called for a suspension of flood control projects. We still need flood control, but if we give the same funds to DPWH, at best, we will only get 50% of our money's worth because of the inefficiencies in implementing these projects. And at worst, it might end up being ghost projects, just like what was seen in some other districts in the past few days.
Well, Congressman, as you lobby for this in the House, for sure many congressmen would still want to have those flood control projects in their districts. How will you counter that and argue realistically that the classrooms are more urgent? And how can you get your colleagues to agree to that realignment?
I think the President has made education a top priority since the State of the Nation address, and that one of the preconditions perhaps for new flood control projects in a district is going to be a comprehensive audit on the quality of the existing flood control projects. Much of the problem is in the bidding process by the district engineers, and if the same district engineers are going to bid out new flood control projects, you can bet that it's going to be the same quality. And so perhaps we can say you can have a flood control project if every flood control project implemented by your district has been vetted as being of good quality.
Well, you personally inspected more than 1 billion pesos worth of flood control projects in Batangas recently, Congressman. What did you see on the ground?
I saw that almost all of them had some, if not a lot of damage, and that damage would be caused by substandard design on the projects, where the structures are held onto the riverbed by sheet piles, which appeared to be shorter than they should have been based on the DPWH's program of works, which is perhaps one way that the contractors were able to significantly save on the costs. Had they not been torn away by recent storms, then we would not have known that the sheet piles were shorter than designed. But thankfully, we can now verify that many of them were, which is, I think, a grounds for further charges to be filed against the flood control contractors.
And was that consistent, Congressman, among most of the projects that you inspected? And among them are along the rivers of Lian, Palico, Binambang, and Pansipit.
I'd say that the damage was consistent across all the projects. As to the actual non-compliance on the
substandard quality, yeah.
DPWH program of works, the audit is still ongoing because, of course, we want to be precise when we make these claims. And as to why the contractors were compelled to find a way to save on the cost of their projects, perhaps many's guess is as good as mine. But this is also consistent with the comments that are made by others in other DPWH districts.
And what about your constituents, the residents of Batangas, when they see these projects, knowing that billions were spent, particularly yung sa Diokno Highway pa lang, Congressman, ano? I mean, the roads there were just newly constructed and yet they were already washed away after Typhoon Krising. So it goes to show that they can't even withstand a single season of a typhoon.
That's right, and I think that taxpayers are generally very frustrated now because Filipinos pay some of the highest value-added taxes in Southeast Asia, and yet we're not getting what we pay for in taxes. So one of the things that I proposed by our recent congressional hearing was that some of the savings on flood control can even be used for lower taxes. But the DOF said we should try and fund other things first, in which case I would say that education is going to be infrastructure that the public can benefit from more surely and immediately, because we all know about how the ratio of students to classrooms in this country is well above the recommended levels, resulting in some schools even imposing shifting on their students. And so if we can divert the stated amount of the flood control budget towards classrooms, and if we implement the classroom construction efficiently, we could possibly even solve almost all of the 165,000 classroom shortage identified by the Department of Education.
But Congressman, you did point out earlier the lack of feasibility studies in all these flood control projects, particularly in Batangas. So the question is, how do these projects get approved? Who signs them off and who should be held accountable? Is it DPWH? Is it the contractors? Is it the district engineers, regional directors? Sino po ba talaga ang accountable dito?
The DPWH Planning Office is the one that identifies and submits the projects for approval of Congress. And in the past years, these have been approved by Congress. And I think now, with awareness of this issue, Congress would be good to scrutinize whether the projects that are proposed have both been studied and are backed up by a track record of implementation by the DPWH districts.
Well, let's talk about the 2026 budget. I believe you've already taken a look at it, Congressman. What did you see in terms of the DPWH's proposed flood control projects in Batangas? And would you say some of them are questionable?
Yes, to use one example, there is a proposal for another 150 million pesos on the Lian River when the first phase of the Lian River flood control project already had some damage, and it was admitted by the DPWH that this new phase didn't have a feasibility study, and so they themselves volunteered to take it away. There are also flood control projects in other towns of Batangas that didn't have feasibility studies at all, and it makes one question why the DPWH is so keen on prioritizing flood control when the president himself said in his speech that he wants to prioritize solving the classroom shortage. So I'm optimistic that with political will behind it, we will be able to divert a lot of these funds into education and make significant advances. Because I was told by the Department of Education officials in a recent briefing that the reason why we've capped the budget for classrooms at 13 billion is because we were not able to find funds for more than that. But suddenly now we have, and therefore we can have reason to hope that we can solve the classroom shortage.
Right. But Congressman, itong mga flood control projects, you also mentioned that you talked to some engineers and even they said that these projects won't reduce or solve flooding in Batangas. What made them say that? And are these engineers from the DPWH itself?
We've engaged former DPWH engineers to do an audit on these projects. And if the projects are properly implemented, then most of them can, except that they have been damaged even just after the first typhoon season. So that's what I mean by saying that they won't benefit the district. And I think that's a even more generous example than in other districts, because it's already been documented that there are other districts in the country where there are even ghost flood control projects.
And Congressman, aside from flood mitigation, well, the DPWH has also outlined different proposed projects per district. And in the first district, correct me if I'm wrong, kasama ang major road projects like the Tuy Diversion Road and the Tagaytay-Nasugbu Road. Do your constituents feel that these are actual projects that should be prioritized?
Definitely, we need both flood control and roads. The problem is DPWH's implementation of them. And to use the example of the roads that you mentioned, one of the other things we inspected is that some of these roads are being built with asphalt instead of concrete, which is not appropriate for a flood-prone area, which the locals actually reached out to DPWH to ask that these roads not be built as asphalt instead of concrete, to which the DPWH had its own reasons for saying that they were encouraged to make them using asphalt instead of concrete. So there's certainly a lot more worth questioning in DPWH projects than just flood control. And I look forward to the results of this first wave of scrutiny on flood control projects in hopes that this would lead to more systematic improvements in how DPWH selects and implements its projects.
But going back to the defective projects, you did say that contractors should be forced to go back and fix them, but we're not really sure if there are mechanisms for that. So are you prepared, Congressman, to file any kind of legislation or maybe support other legislation that would strengthen accountability for contractors and even DPWH officials?
That's a very good point, because the DPWH projects do have a 1-year warranty after they are completed, and some of the damaged flood control projects in my district have been completed in less than 1 year. So we can certainly make claims, except the DPWH engineer said that they cannot make claims on projects damaged due to force majeure, as if heavy rains are unforeseen and unexpected when you're designing flood control projects. So I think it's also important that not only the audit be done by independent parties, but the warranty claims be done so that we can really run after the contractors by people who have no reason to want to protect the contractors. And maybe 1 year warranty is too short. And one way that we can also get more worth out of the money of taxpayers is by having new standard contracts in DPWH that have more means to run after the contractors for a longer period of time.
And Congressman, it is your first term in office, and I'm curious because you are also a vice chair of the Appropriations Committee. Personally, what are some of the concrete steps you are taking to make sure that every peso is allocated for, and to make sure that these budget allocations don't go to waste?
First, on behalf of my district, I will not propose adding or making amendments for new flood control projects that are not backed up by feasibility studies, and while the district engineers have not proven that they have gotten the full worth of taxpayers' money off the existing flood control projects. And second, when it comes to DPWH procurement in general, I'm going to make sure that there will be nothing illegal happening when it comes to how these projects are being procured. The consumers and the public should get their money's worth from the budgets that are given to DPWH districts.
And finally, Congressman, what is the current status of House Bill number 27? That was your very first bill as a congressman, and it seeks to provide a 1,000 peso monthly allowance for all students from kindergarten to college. What's the status of that, and how feasible is that, Congressman?
Thank you for this question, because the Basic Education Committee, of which I am also the vice chair, just had our organizational meeting this Monday, and we're supposed to have our next meeting to tackle bills in the coming weeks. And one of the inspirations for this bill is that there's so much waste in DPWH. Initially, I was told that there's no big amount of the budget that can be realigned, but it seems like the DPWH was so ready to propose 250 billion plus of spending on flood control. So certainly we can fund a lot more educational initiatives. I would say that classrooms can be funded immediately, and after that, additional support for teachers, operating expenses of schools, and allowances for students. We have piloted it in our own district and have seen that the students are making good use of it, because it costs a lot to go to school in the first place. So any additional assistance given to them does help them on those expenses. And that if we can hopefully roll it out using existing programs even before the law is passed in the next few months even, then it could hopefully help build the case for a more expanded program enabled by the law. But that we are, of course, going to work through all possible ways, even before the law is passed, to implement this so as to increase the chances that the law can be passed and the program funded permanently.
Well, we will continue to monitor that. But for now, thank you very much for joining us and thank you for your time. That was Batangas 1st District Representative Leandro Leviste. Now, in other news, the COMELEC is now looking into possible violations of campaign finance laws by at least 4 then senatorial candidates. Chairman George Garcia told Storycon that they have received tips linking government contractors to suspicious donations. He stressed that Section 95 of the Omnibus Election Code strictly prohibits contributions from government contractors. The poll body is set to send letters to the contractors allegedly involved, asking them to explain their side.
We will have to write a letter addressed, for example, to the contractor for the contractors to explain their side naman in case we will confirm that indeed these individuals are contractors or yung company mismo or companies mismo nila ang nagbigay, hindi lang pala yung individual.
Now stay tuned, we still have more stories coming up. Morning Matters will be right back after this short break. Welcome back. You're still watching Morning Matters here on One News. Vice President Sara Duterte hit back at Palace press officer Undersecretary Claire Castro, who called her performance as Education Secretary a complete failure. Duterte dismissed the remark, noting that President Bongbong Marcos himself once tried to stop her from resigning.
Hindi ko maintindihan saan nanggagaling yung total failure ako as a Department of Education Secretary. Kasi iba yung actions ni BBM noong ako ay nag-tender ng resignation. Inofera niya ako, may gusto ka ba na posisyon? Sabi ko, wala akong gustong posisyon. Tapos ang sunod niyang sinabi sa akin, pwede ka bang tumulong sa midterm elections para sa mga senators? So, hindi iyon actions ng taong tumitingin as failure ako. Action yon ng taong tumitingin na kailangan niya yung trabaho ko.
The Vice President also alleged that Marcos smelled of alcohol during their encounter in Malacanang. Castro did not directly address the alcohol allegation, but insisted that the Vice President's claims have no basis and were motivated by what she called a selfish ambition to undermine the President.
Pag-alis ko, nagbeso-beso siya sa akin. This was 10:25 or 10:30 in the morning. Amoy alak siya. At kung ako ang pahulain, kung ano yung alak na yon, whiskey. Doon na-confirm yung decision ko na mag-resign. So, hindi ako ang failure. Siguro, ang failure is yung 10:30 pa lang ng umaga, amoy alak ka na.
In other news, detained preacher Apollo Quiboloy's legal counsel, Attorney Israelito Torion, said they have not yet received any official document confirming that the United States has filed an extradition request for Quiboloy. In a statement, Torion acknowledged that Washington may file such a request under the extradition treaty between the Philippines and the U.S. He added, however, that a provisional arrest may no longer be necessary since Quiboloy is already detained while awaiting the resolution of his motion for reconsideration after his bail petition was denied. Torion also expressed hope that the Philippine government will allow local courts to fully exercise jurisdiction over Quiboloy's case before deciding on any possible extradition request.
We are requesting that the Philippine government would take the high ground, because if you read Article 11 of the extradition treaty between the Philippines and the United States of America, the requested state really has the option, if the extradition request is granted, whether to surrender him or not, regardless as to whether or not the cases are pending or has already been decided against him.
And now shifting gears to sports, the Creamline Pool Smashers opened their PVL Invitational title defense with a hard-fought win over the Signal HD Spikers. Michelle Gumabao led the charge with 22 points and 15 digs, including 5 crucial markers in the deciding fifth set. Meanwhile, Gemma Galanza added 18 points and 17 excellent receptions. In another match, the PLDT high-speed hitters defeated Cherry Tigo in straight sets. Alea Malaluan starred for PLDT, scoring 11 points and contributing 13 excellent digs. And don't go away, we still have more matters to discuss after the break. Keep it here on One News.
it's very parang early on when you came in as a anong tawag ang
Press officer,
as
Palace
a press officer. Ang napansin ng mga tao parang ito ang Malacanang under BBM is on attack mode. Was that the marching orders from the palace, from the president?
I did not receive any marching order to be an attack dog. What was given to me is to fight fake news. Yun talaga yung una Kasi ang dami talagang lumalabas na fake news na naguguluhan din yung mga kapwa natin Pilipino. Kasi sabi nga natin, pag ito lagi nasa utak ng mga kababayan natin na puro fake news, mas mahihirapan sila mag-decide. At ano na yung paniniwalaan nila? Totoo ba to o hindi? So that's one of my tasks, to fight fake news. So attack dog, I don't consider myself as an attack dog.
Defend dog, maybe.
Pwede.
Mas gusto mo yon?
Kasi hindi ako nag-attack
Okay.
Ang ina-attack nila yung Pangulo So what should I do? Defend the government, defend the president. So sinabi, anong unang tanong sa akin, I will not forget this. It's from Maricel Halili. First time.
Reporter namin dito sa News 5.
That's right. Sabi ko, history ka sa akin. Sabi ko, may history ka sa akin. Sabi ko, ang unang tanong niya sa akin is, if I'm not mistaken, parang the president is gearing towards dictatorship, something like that. So, it is an attack.
On the president.
On the president. So what should I do? I have to defend. So what can we expect from the former president? To create intrigues and to plant evidence. So, bakit ko nasabi yun? He admitted that. Hindi yun galing sa akin. Those were his words. So, di ba? You're just creating intrigues against the president. So, kaya siguro sinasabi lang, attack dog ako. I'm not. They were the ones attacking the president.
You're there to defend.
Yes, of course. That's my job.
And was that the marching order? Or the marching order was phrased in the word fight fake news?
Yes, fight fake news.
So, but the very word fight,
Yes.
medyo aggressive yung word na fight.
I have
Lalaban.
to. Kasi every Filipino has the obligation to fight fake news. Hindi lang ako. Lahat tayo dapat, including the media. Dapat pag alam nating fake news yan, i-call out na natin yan. That's fake. Ako yun.
In your job as being the defender of the president, defend dog na, sabi mo kanina, no? In the course of that, marami kang nakakaaway. I'm sure, di ba? Marami kang nakakasagutan, nakakasparing, let's say.
Saan? Sige nga.
Kasagutan, let's say, si Harry Roque. Kasagutan
online lang naman yun.
Si VP Sara. Pero I'm sure may ganun. Does it bother you na may mga ganun? O wala rin sa'yo yun?
Wala sa akin kasi hindi sa akin nag-start Sa kanila naman. So, ang gagawin ko lang is sumagot. So, every word na sabihin nila yan, aaralin ko yan. Diba? Ba't gano'n ang sinabi niya? So, saka ako sasagutin. Kailangan sumagot. Kasi pag hindi mo yan sinagot, yung mga kasinungalingan nila, mananatili yan sa utak ng tao, iisipin nila, totoo yun. O, like what happened to this Kuwait, travel. Kung hindi ko yan kinat agad, at sinabi kong that's fake, kasi in-splice nila yung video ko, so maisipin ng tao at na mga supporters niya, at gagamitin pang video to or sa kanilang mga TikTok na ako yung fake news, when in fact, in-splice nila yung video. So kailangan i-correct yun. So hindi ako nakikipagsagutan. Kailangan ko lang siyang i-correct. Yan.
Good morning and welcome back. I'm Pauline Verzosa, and here on Morning Matters, we talk about the most pressing issues to give you the context behind the headlines. Former President Rodrigo Duterte's legal team has renewed its request for his interim release from ICC custody. Duterte's lawyer, Nicholas Kaufman, said the unnamed state remains willing to accept him under any conditions set by the court. The defense earlier claimed it faced delays in gathering documents to support the request, but prosecutors countered that the move was inconsistent and aimed at stalling proceedings. Duterte is currently detained in The Hague on crimes against humanity charges linked to his bloody war on drugs. And now to help us understand the legal and practical implications of that move, we have with us this morning Attorney Gilbert Andres, ICC accredited lawyer and executive director of the Center for International Law Philippines. Good morning, Attorney, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Polly from the Netherlands, and good morning also to all our viewers.
Well, here we go, Attorney. The Duterte's legal team has renewed its request for interim release. From the perspective of the victims, what are the main dangers of this, and how unusual is this request in ICC practice? How often do accused individuals request for interim release?
Well, for the victims, this is unfortunate because, in fact, the victims have earlier stated their really very serious concerns about any interim release that would be granted due to their security risks, as well as the influence, the extensive influence still of the Duterte family.
Mm-hmm. And given that so much of the motion of the defense attorney is hidden from public view, I mean, the document was heavily redacted. Do you believe this is related to health issues concerning President Duterte?
Actually, since, as you stated earlier, it's heavily redacted, it's really difficult to speculate as of now on the real grounds. But it's also unfortunate that there is this second application for interim release because, in fact, there was a first application, and also the defense itself was the one who filed for the deferral of the court's decision on the first interim release. So it's also unfortunate that we have this second application for interim release.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in this motion, attorney, the defense argues that a state, the unnamed state, is willing to accept him under any conditions. But in your view, is that sufficient assurance that, in this case, Mr. Duterte won't obstruct justice?
Well, I think this is not a sufficient assurance because in the first place, there is still a heightened security risk for the witnesses as well as for the victims, especially given the Philippine context that the Duterte family are still in power. In fact, no less than the daughter of Mr. Duterte is Vice President of the Philippines. And I think the local context is very important in this case.
Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, attorney, the first application did name a different country than what was earlier disclosed or said to the prosecution, and that's why they actually felt blindsided by the defense. Would this be the same country they're talking about now in the first application?
Pauline, it's really difficult to divine as of now, which are those specific countries because we can only speculate. And the two documents are heavily redacted. But given these limitations, actually what the pretrial chamber will really look at is whether or not the conditions that were stated for the granting of the warrant of arrest are still present. What are those? Number one is security risk. Number two, that the person who is detained will still be present during the proceedings. And third is any other conditions as to the security risk. So I think for the victims, we reiterate that there will be a heightened security risk if this interim release will be granted.
And prosecutors did say, attorney, that the defense might be stalling. Do you agree that this motion is somewhat a tactic to delay the confirmation of charges happening in September?
Well, I think what is clear is that the defense has already indicated in their previous submissions that they want the September 23 confirmation of charges reset. That's actually very clear. And in fact, we are against this because, in fact, the victims have the right to justice, they have the right to access to justice, and they have the right to truth. So we don't want any delays in the confirmation of charges. The victims don't want any resetting of the 23 September confirmation of charges because the victims also have the right to justice.
Well, speaking of the victims, attorney, how has it been working with them, and will they be consulted again to weigh in on Mr. Duterte's request?
Actually, it's been a pretty rough ride, because it's always been a challenge with respect to the victims because they have been waiting for a semblance of justice for the past, let's say, 9 years since the 2016 Duterte presidency. And in fact, even for some, it has been since 2011 during the local stintship of Mr. Duterte in Davao City. So it has been really a ups and downs for the victims' families because I remember they have suffered harm in terms of the war on drugs, and they have really been awaiting this semblance of justice from the ICC.
So if the pretrial chamber denies this request for interim release of Mr. Duterte, is that a really big victory also as well for the victims' attorney, and considering that will be also protecting their integrity and the integrity of the proceedings?
Well, for the victims, we hope that this will be denied because, in fact, if we just based it on historical jurisprudence, an accused or a detainee, a person charged under Article 5 of the Rome Statute, has never been granted an application for interim release. That has been the jurisprudence of the ICC. And we hope that this jurisprudence will hold, and we hope that the pretrial chamber will, in fact, deny this application for interim release due to the heightened security risk to the victims' families as well as the witnesses.
But how should the public perceive this renewed request of the defense? Should it be, because it is a renewed request, and is it sort of a strategy? Could it also influence public perception?
Well, we can only divine as to what the strategy is. But it's clear that there is actually a manifestation that they want a resetting of the September 23 confirmation of charges. But for us victims, we want to reiterate that there's also the right to justice for the victims because they're also an intrinsic part of these proceedings versus before the ICC. Therefore, we really hope that the confirmation of charges will push through for the justice for the victims.
And would you know, attorney, if there are any pending arrests for other personalities also involved in the war on drugs?
It's also difficult as of now to really divine as to there are pending warrants of arrest because in the context right now, I think the Office of the Prosecutor is focused on the September 23 confirmation of charges because remember there are also disclosure duties and there are also timelines. So I think they're more focused now on the September 23 confirmation of charges. But having said that, it does not actually stop the Office of the Prosecutor from continuing their investigation as to any persons who are still should be criminally held responsible for the war on drugs.
And interestingly, attorney, I mean, Senator Bato de la Rosa repeatedly said that there are still ICC investigators in the country, and some of them have even been given assistance by the government. Do you think that's really happening right now? There are still ICC investigators in the country despite us not being a member state anymore?
Well, as to that specific allegation, I cannot really confirm nor deny. But having said that, it's actually within the treaty obligations of the Philippines to fully cooperate with the ICC because we have always been saying that there are still residual obligations or in Filipino may mga natitira pa pong obligasyon ang Pilipinas even though it withdrew from the ICC, and it's stated in Article 127 of the Rome Statute. So for me, it's just right for the Philippines to fully cooperate with the continuing ICC investigation on the Philippine war on drugs.
And so a month from now, the confirmation of charges will be taking place right there in The Hague. Attorney, how are you preparing for that, and what can the public expect?
Well, first, we are really reviewing the facts of the situation, the Philippine situation. Secondly, we're also preparing as to the legal arguments. And also, we're closely coordinating with the victims' families as to how to best represent them. But I also want to add, Pauline, that this will also be contingent on the pre-trial chamber appointing a legal representative for victims, because actually that's also one of the processes that is being undergone in the meantime, as well as the victim participation. So there are actually 3 processes that are going parallel. So that's the OTP preparation, that's also the pretrial chamber victim participation process, as well as the appointment of the legal representative for victims.
And during the confirmation of charges, attorney, will the victims be allowed to be there, and what happens after that?
So the victims can be personally present, but due to the heightened security risks, so there are always that context, so they can also be present through their legal representative for victims, who can present actually an opening statement as well as a closing statement during the confirmation of charges. And the focus really for the victims, the onus probandi, or the duty to show that this confirmation of charges should go to the trial proper, that's the duty of the Office of the Prosecutor. While for the victims, their opportunity is really to show the suffered harm because of the war on drugs. So if we get appointed, or whoever gets appointed as legal representative for victims, we hope that the suffered harm of the victims will really be shown during the confirmation of charges.
Well, we will continue to monitor this. We are counting down the days. But for now, thank you very much for joining us. Alam ko madaling araw na po dyan sa the Netherlands, but we thank you for your time. Attorney Gilbert Andres, ICC accredited lawyer and executive director of the Center for International Law Philippines. Thank you, attorney.
Thank you, Ed. Mabuhay po tayo.
Meantime, President Bongbong Marcos has created a new office to spearhead the rehabilitation of the Pasig River. Under Executive Order 92, the Office of the Presidential Advisor on Pasig River Rehabilitation will oversee the restoration of the river's water quality, marine life, and surrounding communities. It shall also monitor, coordinate, and harmonize all policies, plans, activities, and programs of the implementing agencies in charge of the rehabilitation. The office will be led by Presidential Advisor Jose Rizalino Acuzar and will work alongside the reorganized Interagency Council for Pasig River Urban Development. And that wraps up today's episode of Morning Matters. We hope we've given you just the right start to your morning. Let's make the day matter. I'm Pauline Verzosa. Have a great weekend. We are One News, all sides, all the time.